Dr. Chopra. So we are almost ready to host. We'll wait for a few more minutes. I can see that people are joining us. So we'll give them a few more minutes before we get started.
How many folks?
So far, I can see we have 8 attendees and 3 of us.
How many signed up?
So we have about 30 people who signed up. So we'll give them a few more minutes. I'm sure people are getting their coffee just like you did and getting started.
Planning a Q&A as well, right?
What was that?
You're planning a question and answer at the end?
Yes. So we will have your presentation for about half an hour to 40 minutes, and then
about 45 minutes.
Okay, 45 minutes followed by a 10-minute Q&A.
We can do 15, 20, whatever.
Okay. I'm sure people would like to stay on. If you have more questions, they would stay on for pretty much all the night. So we'll have to figure out an ending point. I think this is a good time and we should get started. So all right. So hello everyone and welcome to our webinar with Dr. Sanjiv Chopra. I'm Maddie Farke. I'm the Director of Development at the Healing Garden. I'm here with our guest, Dr. Chopra, and Meg Cook, our Executive Director. I'm excited to be hosting this session. I'm actually sitting in my office at the Healing Garden, and I'm looking out of my window at our beautiful gardens. They're in full bloom right now. So if you'd like to visit our gardens, they're open to the public. So feel free to come and walk around. They're open Mondays to Fridays, 9 to 5. And you can take a look at some of the regulations that we have on our website just to keep everyone safe and follow the social distancing. Currently, our building is open just for the administrative staff. So it's just me, Meg, our Executive Director, and our Finance Manager and our Office Manager who are here most of the time. We are not yet open for our clients, but we are working on that. And we are really being optimistic, and we're hoping that we'll be able to open our building and open it up to our clients by the end of the summer. Although our building is closed, our programs and services are still going on. Most of our programs and services are now offered virtually using a HIPAA compliant platform. And I have to thank you all our supporters, and our entire community for the love and the support they've shown us that has helped us keep these programs going and let us offer the care and support to our clients at this very difficult time. And Dr. Chopra is one such supporter and friend of ours that we're very grateful for. Dr. Chopra is a professor of medicine and has served as the faculty dean for continuing medical education at Harvard Medical School for 12 years. He serves as a Marshall Wolf Master Clinician Educator at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Chopra is a sought-after inspirational speaker across the globe addressing diverse audiences on topics related to medicine, leadership, happiness, and living with purpose. He has more than 150 publications and 10 books to his credit. His latest book, The Two Most Important Days, that he co-authored with Gina Wild, has been a huge success. So before I hand this over to you, Dr. Chopra, I just have a few housekeeping items. The audience is going to be in listen mode only. If you have any technical issues or any problems listening to us or anything like that, please use the chat box to let me and Meg know, and we'll be able to help you out. The presentation will be for 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. So for the Q&A session, again, please use the chat box to write your questions. You could write it during the presentation or after. And for those who are using a cell phone, if you tap on your screen, I think you should be able to see the chat box. Today's webinar is being recorded. The audience names and the chats that you type in will not be recorded. And hopefully we'll have the viewing instructions for this video up on our website by tomorrow. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our favorite, Dr. Sanjiv Chopra. Over to you.
Thank you so very much, Maddie. Could we have the first slide on?
Sure. So Dr. Chopra, you will have to share your screen to get your slide up.
Okay. We had it up before.
Yeah, we did, and then when we switched it, but you can go back. So right now we can see Dr. Chopra's his laptop screen, and we're just trying to find, he has a PowerPoint presentation for us, which he's going to put up. Is that the one?
All right. Do you see it on the screen?
Yes, we see it on the screen.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So let's get started. Thank you so very much for inviting me to speak on a topic that I'm very passionate about. The subject of leadership has fascinated me for as far back as I can remember, even when I was a child. If I ask you to conjure up images of great leaders from history and contemporary times, who comes to mind? What stories resonate for you? Let us together embark on this wonderful journey. So all great leaders, by their passion and sense of purpose and their accomplishments, live a great story. And then their story is told by their followers. They're told by historians. They're told for decades, generations, sometimes centuries. They resonate in all the lands. There's something very glaringly wrong with this picture that you see. They're all men. But that's how I grew up, thinking that most great leaders were men. I'll come back to that later in the talk. So I created this leadership mnemonic many years ago. I wrote a book about this topic. And as you can see, it spells out the word leadership. So great leaders listen with heart and soul. They have empathy and compassion. They have an attitude that is upbeat and courageous. They dare to dream big. They're effective. They're resilient. They have a sense of purpose. They have humility. They often have great humor. They have integrity. They have wild ideas. They have great imagination. And they pack other people's parachutes. And I'm going to tell you a story about Captain Charlie Plum and packing people's parachutes. So the first attribute is that great leaders are very good listeners. There's an anonymous quote, I was told a year ago or so, that this may in fact be a Kurdish proverb. Listen 100 times, ponder 1,000 times, speak once. Oliver Wendell Holmes at Harvard once said, "It is in the province of knowledge to speak. It is in the privilege of wisdom to listen." Abraham Lincoln once said, "It is better to be silent and be thought a fool than to speak up and dispel all doubt." So listen with heart and soul. The second attribute of great leaders is they have empathy and compassion. We were very fortunate to have His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a keynote speaker at a Harvard continuing medical education course when I had the privilege of serving as the faculty dean. He embodies serenity, tranquility, wisdom, gratitude, humility. And he once said, "Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible." He also said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. In the Talmud, it says compassion is the highest form of wisdom. Now, here on this screen, you see an individual by the name of Dr. Paul Farmer. Many of you may know of him or have read about him. He has provided, together with Jim Kim, they were medical students together at Harvard Medical School. I had the privilege of teaching them GI pathophysiology. This is many years ago. They have provided the most seminal care for the poorest of the poor, the most destitute, in Haiti, in Rwanda, in Peru, Russian prisoners with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. And Paul Farmer once said, the idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that's wrong with the world. His favorite billboard is one that he encountered in Haiti some 25 years ago. And it says, "The only true nation is humanity." The only true nation is humanity. Now, here's an individual you see with end-stage HIV/AIDS, a skeleton of a man. He's going to die in a few weeks. And Paul Farmer, together with Jim Kim, go to the pharmacy at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, where they worked, with an empty suitcase. And they sweet talk their way into the pharmacist giving them $93,000 worth of antiretrovirals. They flew to Haiti, they administered it to this man, and this is the same individual who is now fully recovered and has this beautiful baby. The story of Paul Farmer's work is told in a wonderful book by Tracy Kidder. Tracy Kidder is a 3-time Pulitzer Prize winner. The book is called Mountains Beyond Mountains, The Quest of Dr. Paul Farmer, a man who would cure the world. Paul Farmer received the MacArthur Genius Award. That time it was $450,000, and he's plowed it all into his foundation. An amazing individual with a heart of gold, full of compassion, full of wisdom. The A in the leadership mnemonic means that leaders have an attitude that is upbeat. It's all about attitude. This is a story of a huge building coming up in Texas. There's a newspaper reporter with a photographer going to write a story about this. He sees a laborer with a wheelbarrow full of bricks, and he turns to him and he says, "Sir, what kind of work do you do?" And the guy was irked. He said, "Can't you see? I'm moving bricks on this hot and muggy day." And a few minutes later, there's another laborer, similar wheelbarrow full of bricks. He's smiling, he's whistling. He turns to the newspaper reporter and he nods. And the reporter asks the same question, "So what kind of work are you doing?" And he answered, "I'm helping build the most beautiful cathedral in the world." There's a story of a janitor at NASA who was asked a question, "What work do you do, sir?" He said, "I'm part of the team that helps put astronauts to conquer that next frontier. We call it space. So leaders possess an attitude that is upbeat and courageous. So Winston Churchill once said, courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities, because it is the quality that guarantees all others. So great leaders lead with both heart and soul. Their countries now, North Korea, parts of the Mideast, until recently Myanmar, used to be called Burma, lots of change, some controversy right now. They have leaders without soul. Those countries will not only be economically and ecologically disadvantaged, they will be spiritually bankrupt. They will emerge free from the morass and the shackles only when an enlightened leader emerges. The D in the leadership mnemonic is that great leaders dare to dream big. They have big dreams. They articulate it to their followers who passionately follow them. They don't think of the obstacles in the way. This is also a true story of a small town, small school, and the teacher says to the 16-year-olds, write down an essay on what you want to do when you grow up. This is a 16-year-old boy. His father had moved from town to town, working in different stables. He writes a 7-page essay on how he wants to own a 180-acre horse farm. He has pictures about the stables, sketches about horses, pony rides, talks about nutrition, and he hands it to the teacher. And a few days later, the teacher calls him and he says, I'm giving you a grade of F. This is a totally unrealistic dream. No one in our small town has ever achieved anything like this. But you're a very bright student. And if you want, you can write another essay and I'll be happy to give it a grade. So he goes home, he thinks about it, talks to his father, and the next day he returns with the same essay and he gives it to the teacher and he says, you can keep the F, I will keep my dream. And the true story is that some 24 years later, he has a 172-acre horse farm. And the teacher writes to him, says, can I bring the kids for a picnic to your farm? And he says, yes, sir, please come. You're most welcome. And when they come, the teacher in front of the kids turns to him and says, I want to apologize. I was a dream stealer. I shall never do it again. The great poet Robert Browning said, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? And Søren Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher and theologian, once said, to dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. So great leaders dare to dream big. Lao Tzu once said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I'm often asked, Sanjiv, who comes to your mind when the word great leader is used, or the phrase leadership moment? And for me, it is unmistakably Mahatma Gandhi. I was born in India a year after he was assassinated. But we learned stories in school. We heard stories from our grandparents, our uncles, our parents. I read everything about Gandhi. I watched the movie Gandhi, where Ben Kingsley acted as Gandhi and got the Oscar for the best actor many, many times. It's very, very moving. So the great leadership moment for me is 1930. India is under British rule. The British have imposed this exorbitant tax on salt. And Gandhi writes to the Viceroy. He says, I consider the salt tax to be the most iniquitous, the most repugnant, the most abhorrent of all the laws that you have imposed on the Indian people. And since India's freedom movement should first begin with the poor, I'm going to conduct this salt march. He's going to march about 200 miles. Gandhi is 63. He's quite frail. The British miscalculate and they give him permission. Gandhi assembles 77 other followers. The youngest is 16. Gandhi at 63 is the oldest. He has Hindus, Christians, Muslims, the untouchables, the lowest caste, the terrible caste system in India, join him. And as they march from one village to another, throngs of people join them. Some 28 days later, he arrives in a coastal village. By many accounts, he puts his water into the ocean, he lifts it, and there is salt. And he declares, henceforth, we are not going to pay tax to the British on salt. That image captivated the imagination of millions of Indians. Over the next 6 months, there were 5,000 salt marches. 100,000 Indians were arrested, beaten, jailed, and some died. But it launched India's freedom movement. That image also captivated the imagination of British parliamentarians, leaders in Europe, leaders in America, women cotton factory workers in England. Gandhi once said there are 7 sins: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, and politics without principle. To me, this represents leadership. Great leaders have a work ethic. They have a clear conscience. They have character. They have morality. They have humanity. They make enormous sacrifices and they adhere to their core principles. He was called Mahatma, a term coined by Rabindranath Tagore, a Nobel laureate in literature. This is after Gandhi's work for 20 years in South Africa, fighting discrimination. Maha means great. Atma means soul. He's a great soul. For the common people in India, he was simply known as Bapu, a word that in Hindi means father. He was the father of the nation. These are Gandhi's worldly possessions. He was masterful with his eloquence. India was importing cotton from England and Egypt. He said, no, we can make cotton with the spinning wheel. Ben Kingsley, in preparing for the movie Gandhi, prepared for a year. He fasted. He read everything about Gandhi. He did the spinning wheel. He once said, my record before breaking a thread was 7 minutes. Gandhi's was 9 hours. Gandhi once said, it is my certain conviction that with every thread I draw, I'm spinning the destiny of India. Why didn't Gandhi tell the boy not to eat sugar the first time that he met him? There's a story of Gandhi and a 12-year-old boy. The boy on the screen is a different boy, much younger. So this woman, mother, walks with her 12-year-old son some 10, 15 miles in the hot sun from a village to meet Gandhi at his ashram. She says, Gandhiji, my son adores you. He worships you. He'll do anything for you. Look at him. He's gained a lot of weight. Would you please tell him not to eat sugar? So Gandhi looks at the boy and the mother and he says, come back in 10 days. So 10 days later, they trudge again, 10, 12 miles in the heat and the dust. And Gandhi looks at the boy and he says, son, don't eat sugar. It's not good for your health. And the boy says, Gandhiji, from this moment onwards, I have given up sugar. And he leaves the room. The mother stays behind. And she says to Gandhi, she says, Gandhiji, thank you for saying that to my son. But can I ask you a question? We were here 10 days ago, and you could have said the same thing to my son then. And Gandhi whispers into her ear, at that time, I had not given up sugar. So leaders lead by example. They live and breathe what they preach and teach. Albert Einstein and Gandhi were considered the 2 greatest leaders of the last century. And this is Albert Einstein's tribute to Gandhi. He said, generations to come, it may be, will scarce believe that such a one as this, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth. The Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the Nelson Mandelas, the young people of the Arab Spring, Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma, have all talked about Gandhi and his life as being the greatest and most inspiring thing that led them to do what they've done. Now, the E in the leadership mnemonic is effective. Peter Drucker, the management guru, once said, efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things. The same thing can be said about the difference between managers and leaders. We need both. You can be an amazing leader, not a good manager. You can be an inspiring manager, not a great leader. So managers do things right. Leaders do the right things. I had a conversation with then the dean of the Kellogg School of Management, legendary individual by the name of Deepak Jain. He then became dean at INSEAD in Paris, one of the top 5 MBA programs in the world. We were trying to recruit him to Harvard Business School. And I said to Deepak, what's the difference between managers and leaders? He had a wonderful definition. He said, Sanjiv, managers are for today, leaders are for tomorrow. A wonderful definition. Now here's an example of Winston Churchill's oratory. He said, we are resolved to destroy Hitler and every vestige of the Nazi regime. From this, nothing will turn us nothing. We will never parley, we will never negotiate with Hitler or any of his gang. We shall fight him by land, we shall fight him by sea, we shall fight him in the air, until with God's help, we had rid the earth of his shadow and liberate its people from his yoke. Major General Omar Bradley is reputed to have once said, one speech of Sir Winston Churchill has more might than an entire battalion. And John F. Kennedy in 1963 bestowed upon Sir Winston Churchill honorary US citizenship. And at the ceremony, he said, Sir Winston Churchill took the English language and mobilized it into battle. Now this begs the question, was Hitler a great leader? And to my consternation, in that same issue of Time magazine at the end of the last century, where Gandhi and Einstein were rated the greatest leaders, some people nominated Hitler, including one of our governors. But here's what Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate, wrote in that same issue of Time magazine. He said, the fact is that Hitler was beloved by his people, the average Germans who pledged to him an affection, a tenderness, and a fidelity that bordered on the irrational. His kingdom collapsed after 12 years in a war that remains the most brutal, atrocious, and deadliest in history, but which, by the same token, allowed several large figures to emerge. Their names have become legendary: Eisenhower, de Gaulle, Montgomery, Zhukov, and Patton. But when later we evoke the 20th century, amongst the first names that will surge to mind will be that of a fanatic with a mustache who thought to reign by selling the soul of his people to the 1,000 demons of hate and of death. So in my book, and I think in your book, he may have been a fiery orator, a charismatic individual, but not a great leader the way we've defined it. He had all of Gandhi's 7 sins and many more. Now this is Winston Churchill, May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. He's standing at a balcony, gives a short impromptu speech. This is your victory. In all our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this. Everyone has tried, neither the long years, nor the dangers, nor the fierce attacks of the enemy have in any way weakened the independent resolve of the British nation. No sooner has he said the first sentence, this is your victory, that the crowd below erupted and shouted back, no, it is yours. This was the perfect leadership moment where leader and followers are united in purpose and values. Now, I consider Sir Winston Churchill a great leader. He served an amazing purpose during his time, but he was a racist. And this is what he said of Gandhi. He said, it is alarming and also nauseating to see Mr. Gandhi, a seditious Middle Temple lawyer, of the type well known in the East, now posing as a fakir, striding half naked up the steps of the viceregal palace to parley on equal terms with the representative of the King Emperor. He met Gandhi once after Gandhi's assassinations when accolades came from all over the world. Churchill was silent. You cannot find a single record of a statement. Shashi Tharoor, India's permanent representative to the UN for many years, a diplomat, fiery orator, has talked about this, debated this at Oxford. He said in 1943, up to 4 million Bengalis starved to death when Churchill diverted food to British soldiers and countries such as Greece, while a deadly famine swept through Bengal. This is a man the British would have us hail as an apostle of freedom and democracy when he has as much blood on his hands as some of the worst genocidal dictators of the 20th century. 4 million Bengalis died. And when he was told that hundreds of thousands, few million of Bengalis could die, he said, I hate the Indians. It's all their fault. They breed like rapids. They're a beastly people with a beastly religion. He also said, the tragedy is Gandhi won't be one of them. So he served his purpose. I think even great leaders have amazing flaws. And this has been discussed more recently, 10 controversies about Sir Winston Churchill. Now here's a visionary leader by the name of Mohammed Yunus, an economist. And he's traveling from Dhaka, the capital, university where he used to teach, and a nearby village. He meets a lady by the name of Sufia Begum. She made bamboo stools and earned 2 cents a day. 2 cents a day, working 8 to 10 hours a day. He says, I was shocked. In my university courses, I theorized about sums in the millions of dollars, but here before my eyes, the problems of life and death were posed in terms of pennies. He then met 41 other women like Sufia Begum. So together with her, 42. In aggregate, they owed the moneylenders $27. The moneylenders were charging them 10% interest every week, sometimes 10% interest every day. They're not able to repay. So he goes to a number of banks. He says, why didn't you loan these poor people money at a reasonable rate? He said the bankers fell over. They had no interest. So he started his own bank called the Grameen Bank. Over the last 35 years, they've given away $4 billion. 98% are women. He has a 99% return rate, low interest loans. They have fisher women in a coastal village in Bangladesh, catch the fish. Collectively, they have a cell phone. They talk to the merchant in Dhaka, the capital, negotiate the price of the catch, sending their kids to school. Rickshawalas, peddling in the heat and dust on their bicycles, couldn't pay the money lender back. Now they have reasonable loans, pay off the rickshaw, have a livelihood, sending their kids to school. This is the concept of microfinance. This has been adopted in 70 countries around the world. In the citation, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee said Mohammed Yunus has shown himself to be a leader who has managed to translate visions into practical action for the benefit of millions of people, not only in Bangladesh, but also in many countries. And you can see the bliss in his eyes. He found his purpose in life some 35 years ago, starting the Grameen Bank. You know, King Solomon the Wise once said, where there is no vision, the people perish. We need visionary leaders, not only in those poor countries like Bangladesh, which gets its share of cholera and typhoid and earthquakes and cyclones and poverty, but in all countries, including our own. So great leaders reflect on key events in their life or a single magical moment. The moment is often negative, stark, but it is momentous. But that person witnessing it, if they're a leader, have the courage, the fortitude, the grit, the compassion, and develop a laser-like focus and passion to make that dream a reality. The Buddha once said, every life has a measure of sorrow. Sometimes it is this that awakens us. Now here on the screen, you see an individual. I've had the good fortune of meeting him some 12 years ago at a leadership course at the Kellogg School of Management. He's from the country Colombia. His name is Jaime Aramillo, but he's a national hero, and hence the term Papa Jaime. He's about 68 years of age. At age 28, he's standing at a street corner in Bogota, and across the street, there's a sewer. There's an underground city. These orphans live there. A 7-year-old girl emerges, beautiful girl. She's looking at him and smiling. And he's saying to himself, I should help these kids. As they're having this interchange, a car comes around the corner, stops in the middle of the street, window rolls down, somebody tosses a toy. The car recedes. It's a yellow school bus, Fisher-Price toy. That 7-year-old has never possessed a toy. She comes running up to the middle of the street, picks up the toy. She's looking at Jaime Aramillo, beaming with joy. And as they're having this interchange, a speeding truck comes around the corner, smashes her into oblivion. He says to himself, this is it. I'm going to adopt these kids. He has adopted, house schooled, and fed 52,000 children. National hero Papa Jaime said, Papa, how do you pay for it? How many staff do you have? Sanjiv, I have a staff of 150. I have a bakery. We only make cookies. I've convinced all the restaurants in Bogota, Medellin to put a cookie jar next to the cash register. As people are leaving, they grab a cookie, there's a shoebox with a slit, they drop change. I get 50% of my needs that way. Said, Papa, amazing. What about the other 50%? He said, I'm a motivational speaker. I speak all over Latin America, and I plow my honorarium into my foundation. So I said, come on, that doesn't cut it. I know what motivational speakers get. And he smiled. He says, you're right. You know, every time I need money, out of the blue, somebody helps me. He says, 3 weeks ago, I needed 41,000 US dollars. I go to 3 banks. They turned me down. Papa, you already got loans with us at the lowest rate. Don't even tell anyone, or we can't give you more loans. So he's coming back to his office, and there's a street woman across the street. She crosses the street and gives him a hug. Papa Jaime. He turns to her. He says, you hungry? Come to the office. Come. You can have coffee and cookies. So she's sitting in his office having coffee and cookies, and he's on the phone calling 3 other bankers. And she can tell that he's being turned down. After a while, she looks at him, smiles, and says, Papa, how much money do you need? He says, Sanjiv, I told her I need 41,000 US dollars. She opened her purse. She had $60,000. She says to him, I'll give it to you. You need it? Take it now. No questions asked. Your children need it. You can return it to me if you want, when you want. She said, I've saved some other money. I'm okay on the street right now. He said, that kind of thing happens to me all the time. His children have grown up to become computer scientists, teachers, lawyers, accountants, physicians, surgeons. One of them became the junior national champion of Colombia in the sport tennis. And many of them are giving back to the foundation. He found his purpose in life 40 years ago, witnessing the tragic death of that 7-year-old beautiful girl. So great leaders possess a sense of purpose. Montaigne, the French philosopher, said the great and glorious masterpiece of man is to live with purpose. And young people can lead. I've had the privilege of meeting this amazing lady, Jennifer Staple, giving a keynote at a conference she does on global health and innovation every year at Yale. She gets about 3,000 participants from 50 countries. She has 50 speakers. It's an inspiring 2-day event. And years ago, as a pre-med student, she did an ophthalmology elective. And she was saddened to see people who had grown blind from treatable, preventable causes of blindness. Who are these people? Poor people. Poor people from West Haven, New Haven. So she goes back and with 29 other students forms an organization called Unite for Sight. In the last 17 years, they have taken care of more than 1.5 million individuals. They have done sight restoring surgeries on close to 100,000 individuals. She has 4,000 volunteers, medical students, nursing students, web designers, professors of ophthalmology. She got admission to Stanford some years ago, soon after she had started Unite for Sight. And she called the dean of admissions and said, I got to work 80 hours a week on my foundation. Can I defer? And he said, absolutely, Jennifer, take your time. When you're ready, we'll be ready for you. An amazing young leader. Here's another amazing young leader, Mariah Smith. When she was born, she was abandoned outside somebody's home on Christmas Eve. Somebody rang a doorbell, the couple comes out, there's a newborn baby. She grows up in an orphanage, then is adopted by a wonderful family in Virginia. Age 17, goes with her mother, take out food. She's about to sit on the passenger's side of the car, sees a homeless guy, it's winter, he's sitting on the street at a corner and he's shivering. Mom, I'm going to give him the food. Gives him the food, goes home. She says, we got to go back. I got to give him a blanket. She goes back, gives him a blanket. She's now 26. She and her mother go every night or 5 nights a week in a van full of blankets, food, water bottles, insect repellent, vitamin D, raincoats, and dole it out to homeless people. Unconditional love. Many of these people could be in a shelter, but they choose not to be. Many have mental challenges. She was asked, what was the reaction of that first guy you gave the blanket to? She said, oh my God. He looked up. It was a combination of shock and gratitude. It haunts me to this day, but it keeps me going. An angel amongst us, somebody who found her purpose in life at age 17 years of age. Joseph Campbell, amazing individual, wrote wonderful books, A Hero's Journey, The Power of Myth, wonderful documentary series with Bill Moyers in the 80s. If you get a chance, watch it. Talked about mythology. He once said, follow your bliss and doors will open where there were no doors before. The Mohammed Yunuses of the world, the Papa Jaimes of the world, the Mariah Smiths of the world, Jennifer Staples of the world are following their bliss. They're amongst the happiest people on this planet. Now, great leaders have humility. Sir Edmund Hillary, the first person with the Sherpa Tenzing Norgay to climb the highest mountain, Mount Everest, once said, I was just an average bloke. It was the media that transformed me into a heroic figure. But as I learned through the years, as long as you don't believe all that rubbish about yourself, you wouldn't come to much harm. When he came down from the summit, he turned to the Sherpas and he said, what can I do for you? And they said, build schools and clinics for the poor people of Nepal. He devoted most of his life to that. Started the Everest Foundation, the Himalayan Trust. He said, I've enjoyed great satisfaction from my climb of Everest and my trip to the poles, but my most worthwhile things have been building of schools and medical clinics. That has given me more satisfaction than a footprint on a mountain. He also said, it is not the mountain that we conquer, but ourselves. We can conquer our fears, we can conquer our doubts, we can achieve anything. Now, here are two great philanthropists, great friends, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. So wonderful show on TV, GPS. The inaugural show, Fareed Zakaria had invited Bill Gates, 1 hour. And at the end, he says, Mr. Gates, final question. Do you think history will remember you as the man who created Microsoft or the man who created the Gates Foundation? And Bill Gates answers, who knows how history will think of me? The person who played bridge with Warren Buffett? Maybe, or maybe not at all. And look at Warren Buffett. He's a good friend with Melinda and Bill Gates. I actually call it the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. I think she's the driving force, an amazing lady. And Warren Buffett said to them some years ago, you guys have figured out philanthropy. I'll never be able to do it as well. I'm giving you $36 billion on one stipulation. You have to spend $2 to $3 billion a year. Otherwise, I take it back. Doesn't even want to have his name behind that. The Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. An amazing individual. They traveled to Japan, China, and India some years ago to meet with all the billionaires. India now has more billionaires than China or Japan, trying to convince them to give at least 50% of their wealth to meaningful charities and to philanthropy. I define philanthropy as love for humanity. Now, great leaders possess a sense of humor. Benjamin Disraeli and William Gladstone were arch rivals and successive prime ministers. And there's a quote attributable to Prime Minister Disraeli in the newspaper about misfortune. And the next day, a woman reporter interviews him. She said, Prime Minister Disraeli, what's the difference between misfortune and calamity? And without skipping a beat, he says, well, if Gladstone were to fall into the Thames, that would be a misfortune. But if someone were to drag him out, that would be a national calamity. Gandhi had a great sense of humor. And he was once asked, what do you think about Western civilization? This was after tragic beating of thousands of Indians and some deaths, imprisonment. And he replied, I think it would be a good idea. Wonderful sense of humor. Great leaders have integrity. Heraclitus, the great Greek poet and philosopher, was known for his pithy comments. One of the most famous is, no man steps into the same river twice. Right? The man has changed. The river has changed. This is one of his longest ones. The soul is dyed the color of its thoughts. Think only those things that are in line with your principles and can bear the full light of day. The content of your character is your choice. Day by day, what you choose, what you think, and what you do is who you become. Your integrity is your destiny. And the P in the leadership mnemonic is that great leaders pack other people's parachutes. This is Captain Charlie Plum. Many years ago, he's sitting in a diner having breakfast with his wife, and there's a guy sitting 2 rows away. He keeps turning and glaring at him. After a while, he walks up. He says, are you Captain Charlie Plum? Captain Plum looks up and says, sure am, sir. The guy says, you flew F-4 Phantom jets off the Kitty Hawk during the Vietnam War. Your plane was shot, you ejected, you were captured, and you were a prisoner of war for 6 years, and you were tortured. Captain Plum looks up, he says, that's all true. Who are you? And the guy says, I packed your parachute. So Captain Plum gets up, he says, oh my God, obviously you can tell it worked. I've been meaning to look for you and to thank you. Tell me something. Do you keep track of everyone's parachute you've packed? And the guy says, no, sir. It's enough gratification for me to know that I have served. Captain Charlie Plum was 24 years. He had married his high school sweetheart at the Annapolis Naval Academy. Off he goes to Vietnam. He's done 75 successful sorties. It's his last one. 5 days later, he's coming back home. He's shot. He's captured. He's tortured. He's miserable. He's depressed. This is not my war. This is my president's war. I was going home to my bride. And one day, in his dark, dingy, infested cell, he thinks he hears a cricket chirping. So he goes to investigate. Not a cricket, it's a piece of barbed wire scratching the concrete floor through a hole in the wall. So he pulls on it, there's a tug. He lets go. It disappears. It reappears 2 hours later with a piece of toilet paper. Says, I'm a fellow prisoner of war, memorize this code and swallow the toilet paper. The guy tells him that he's already been there for 2 years. He's a fighter pilot. It turns out there are 180 elite US fighter pilots in this prisoner of war camp. Once in a while, they're allowed to eat together in the mess, or they meet 1 or 2 people as they're dumping their stuff in the latrine. One day, through a crack in his cell, he sees a new prisoner of war sitting on a stool, silver hair being cropped. Senator McCain was also in that camp. There's one other guy. He's a midshipman, 21 years of age. He slipped and fell off an aircraft carrier. He was drowning. He was captured, rescued, and brought to the same camp. And 2 years later, the Vietnamese say to him, you're the one guy who didn't drop bombs on us. You can go home. And he's very naive. He says, I'm part of the team. If you release me, you have to release everyone. So, of course, they scoff at him. And the guy who connected with Captain Charlie Plum turns to him and says, listen, I'm the senior most guy in this camp. I'm in charge. Take my marching orders. Go home. And here's the most amazing part of the story. In those 2 years, this midshipman has memorized the names of the other 180 fellow prisoners of war, the names of their first of kin, and their addresses, playing songs in his head that he made up. And on his own accord, or his own money, when he comes back, he crisscrosses the country north to south, east to west, visits their homes. 70% or so of the time, he meets the family, the others have moved. And he says, your husband is alive. Your father is alive. I was a fellow prisoner of war with them in Vietnam. He was the ultimate parachute packer. To me, parachute packing is a metaphor for nurturing, for mentoring, for helping, for enlivening. And as great leaders, we have 2 responsibilities. We have to pack other people's parachutes. Share your talents. And the other, very important, is to thank people who packed your parachutes. And my plea to you, don't wait for the eulogy. Do it now. Write to them, call them. It'll be an amazing experience for both of you, or for many of you. So leadership is a marathon journey, not a sprint. Along the way, there can be many a heartbreak hill. Let me offer you my definition of leadership. Leadership is the ability to articulate a vision and walk the path, such that it inspires people to rise above the banality and strife of their common day existence and achieve a higher and common goal. We've talked about the 10 tenets of leadership: listening, empathy, attitude that's upbeat, courageous, dreaming big, being effective, being resilient, having a sense of purpose, having humility and humor, having integrity, having great ideas. Eleanor Roosevelt, one of my favorites, once said, small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, great minds discuss ideas. And great leaders have imagination. Einstein once said, knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. He said, knowledge will take you from A to B. Imagination will take you anywhere. And then great leaders pack other people's parachutes. There are many other inspirational leaders. There's a whole book about Lincoln by Doris Kearns Goodwin, A Team of Rivals. She's a Bostonian historian, Pulitzer Prize winner, multiple bestsellers. Here are some other inspirational leaders. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. When he's released, he's asked a question. Mr. Mandela, do you harbor resentment against your captors? And he gave the most eloquent answer. He said, I have no bitterness. I have no resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. He said, as I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. The prison of the mind. So many other inspirational leaders, Madame Curie, Eleanor Roosevelt, Mother Teresa, Malala, Oprah Winfrey. We now have an amazing young 16-year-old leader from Sweden, Greta Thunberg. I mentioned this earlier, Eleanor Roosevelt's amazing quote. So this is Greta Thunberg, political activist seeking to stop global warming and climate change. She has spoken at TEDx Stockholm, addressing on climate change. She's met leaders from all the countries, invited to the World Economic Forum at Davos. And in March of last year, with her inspiration, in 100 countries, young people did not go to school. Several months later, in 150 countries, kids skipped school to create awareness about global warming. An amazing young inspirational leader, Greta Thunberg. She got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize last year, together with Jacinda Ardern, 37-year-old Prime Minister of New Zealand, who I think right now is the most inspirational leader of a country in the world. 2 weeks after the mass shooting from an Australian in New Zealand, the gun laws were changed. She's committed $2 billion to tackle mental challenges in young people before they get into trouble as adults, training social workers, parents, teachers, psychologists, and so on. They're going to a 4-day week. She addressed the coronavirus epidemic and brought it to zero. Recently, there have been two cases. An amazing, brilliant, inspirational leader. This is Greta Thunberg again. She said, adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is. Now remember, it is always possible to lead. We can lead at the level of the house of worship, synagogue, church, temple, mosque. We can lead in the healing garden. We can lead in the Rotary Club, in our neighborhood, the place we work. Soren Kierkegaard once said, if I were to wish for anything, I should not wish for wealth and power, but for the passionate sense of the potential. For the eye, whichever young and ardent, sees the possible. Pleasure disappoints, possibility never. What wine is so sparkling, what so fragrant, what so intoxicating as possibility? So leadership opportunities abound. One can lead at many different levels. Your and my leadership doesn't have to be audacious and daunting. Let me finish with the story of the starfish parable. This young girl is walking on a beach. There are 10,000 starfish stranded. She picks a starfish, twirls it, throws it into the ocean, picks another one, does the same. There's an old gentleman sitting on the beach in a rocking chair, smoking a pipe and reading a book. He says, young lady, come over here. So she walks over to him. He says, what are you doing? Do you see there's 10,000 starfish stranded here? Look at the beach across. There are another 10,000. Do you think you're making a difference? So she picks a starfish, twirls it, throws it into the ocean, turns to him and smiles and says, it made a difference to that one. We can all make a difference, small and big ways. Now, many, if not all of you, have already led and done so with distinction. I invite you to take a moment and reflect on it. Then go tell your story. Each one of you has a spark of leadership within you. Keep it ignited. Thank you so very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Chopra. That was incredible. Well, thank you for taking us on this inspiring journey. I do see that we have a few questions, so let's get started. I'm just going to change our screen so that we can see you. And hopefully my video should come up. There we go. All right, so we have a few questions in our chat box. One of the questions that we have is from Meg Cook. So she asked, we are in an unprecedented time of unprincipled leadership. Can true leaders overcome the noise and chaos of these leaders that they're creating?
Yeah, there's a wonderful Greek saying, a people are known by the heroes they crown. People are known by the heroes they crown. So here's my take on it. I don't like to be political. I think a title does not confer upon an individual leadership qualities. You can be an amazing leader without ever having a title. And you can have the title of chancellor, president, CEO, etc., and not be a good leader. But you know what I think? Whether you're a Trump follower, supporter or not, I think historians will look back 30 years, 40 years from now and say this was an amazing time. This was good for the country. Whatever it was, divisiveness, being sort of parochial, it led to many more young people getting into politics, women getting into politics, children rising to the occasion, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans. So it's a moment in our history, and I think we are the strongest and most amazing nation in the world, and we're very resilient. I'm very optimistic, and I think the future is very bright. One of my favorite sayings is from Oprah Winfrey, the future is so bright, it hurts my eyes.
That is beautiful. And like you rightly said, I'm hoping that 30 years down this line, we can look back at this time and realize that because of this, a lot of good things came out of this. Moving on to the next question, let me
interrupt. I think also during this global pandemic, planet Earth is healing as we humans have taken a pause. You know, you can see Mount Everest from northern towns in India. In Delhi, the young children for the first time are seeing blue skies and stars at night. Yosemite Park has never been so pristine. The cherry blossoms in April in Washington were more dazzling. The canals in Venice were clean and had fish. So planet Earth is healing. We have to also heal. And we can take a cue and we can be resilient. We need to first acknowledge the true heroes, the first responders, the people working in pharmacies, grocery stores, making sure the internet connection, the people in the hospitals, the doctors, nurses, janitors, security, amazing leaders. But the rest of us, there is this bonus time and we can recalibrate. We can find meaning and purpose and happiness and flourish.
That is so true. I think that is a good reminder to all of us. We'll take one more question. This is from Christine. How does one find their leadership purpose?
So one thing you can do both for leadership and purpose is take 33 by 5 cards. Every day, at the end of the day in the evening, write down 3, 4, 5 things you did that day. And then give it a reading. Okay, so I'm sorry, give it a rating from 1 to 10. 1, you were miserable. 10, if you're lucky, you were in bliss. And at the end of a month, look at those 3 by 5 cards, and anything that you rated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you strike out. Look at 6, 7, 8, 9. That's what gave joy to you. That's what resonated for you. Your purpose is lurking in there. Your leadership purpose is lurking in there. It will come to you.
That is, yeah, that's a good exercise. Well, I think it's time. It's 6 o'clock. It's time to say goodbye. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Chopra, for reminding us to follow our bliss, for reminding us to do the right thing and dream big. So thank you.
My pleasure. Everyone, stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe.
Absolutely. Goodbye, everyone, and stay safe. Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.